We're going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. So welcome to the September 4th, 2019 Board of Agriculture meeting. And we're going to go ahead and get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. No, would you lead us in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we'll go ahead and do a roll call. I see we have some people in Elko right now. So we'll start with a roll call here in Sparks. Mr. Paris.
Pete Paris, Elko County, Nevada Wool Growers.
Paul No, Clark County, Nursery Industry.
Jim Snyder, Lyon County, Row Crops.
Heather Lackey, Douglas County, Pest Control.
Wes Bradley, Elko County, Livestock.
Paul Anderson, Washoe County, Petroleum.
Arlen Higby, Lincoln County, private public raising.
Charlie Trey, Churchill County, General Farm.
Woody Worthington, Douglas County,
Jim Jeffrey, Humboldt County, livestock.
All right, and we'll jump down to Las Vegas.
Dave Kuhn, representing the dairy industry.
All right, and since we're in Las Vegas, let's go ahead and, if you could, introduce your guest there.
Well, this is Mark French, the former executive director of the State Dairy Commission.
All right, thank you.
I'm just visiting.
All right, and if we could do department staff here in Sparks.
Jennifer Ott, Director.
Dennis Belcourt, Deputy Attorney General.
Jerry Conrad, Deputy Director. Laura Bartos, Executive Assistant.
Doug Ferris, Animal Industry Division Administrator.
Aiden Matievich, Consumer Equitability Division Administrator.
Andre Yurdy, Fiscal Administrator.
Rebecca Allard, Public Information Officer.
Dylan Davidson, Industry and Global Trade Coordinator.
I'm just here for IT support, so I'll be out just
And we'll skip out to Elko. Elko, can you introduce yourself?
Maybe.
It's like Lily
Can you hear
Hooper.
me?
Oh, there you go.
Okay, yeah, it's Lily Wolf.
All right, thank you. And so we'll now finish up here in Sparks with public. If you would introduce yourself.
Who's Spratling, guest?
Gary Kulishevsky, General Manager, Kinder Morgan, guest.
Marie Duncan, rancher, farmer. Just wanted to ask a question.
And that looks to be it. Well, thank you very much and welcome all. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and open up with public comment. We do have one public comment card from Marie Duncan. So if you would be willing to come up to the table here, and it's three minutes.
My name is Marie Duncan. I live in Fallon, Nevada. I came to the board to ask if somebody might help me. I am trying to get, okay, first of all, I have a brand, and it was registered in June 8th, 1932 to my mother's uncle, who was J.A. Steele et al. And I am trying to get his name off the brand. My name was added after 1993 when my uncle, Richard Nash, passed away. My mother's name is on the brand, Precious N. Johnson, and my name, Marie Duncan. The problem is I'm trying to get James A. Steele estate off of my brand. He died in 1942, before I was born, 77 years ago. His wife died in 1950. They had no children. I believe that there is no estate that is running. and I need to have some kind of authority for the estate to get his name off the brand. which is a quarter circle H, a lazy H quarter circle. And I was wondering if somebody might be able to help me rather than suggested that I hire an attorney and go to court to try and get this name off my brand. And I only run about 40 head of cows. They are run inside on private property in Churchill County. I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Marie. And what I'm going to do is pass this off to Director Ott, and I'm sure she and staff will be able to help you out.
Got your contact information.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay, any public comment in Las Vegas?
No.
Any public comment in Elko?
No.
All right, then we'll go ahead and move on to item number 3, the minutes. Approval of June 5th, 2019 meeting minutes. Hopefully everyone had an opportunity to look over the minutes there, and did anyone see anything that needed to be changed, added, deleted? If not, I'm willing to...
Mr. Chairman, I would move to approve.
All right,
I'll
Dr.
second
Sputnik. And heard a couple, but we'll say Blackie was first. First on or second? All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. All right, passes unanimously. And we're going to move on to item number 4, Director's Report. Director Ott.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and for attending. You have my board update in front of you and also available online. I'm going to go through a couple of points just for discussion if anybody is interested. Starting with some of our internal work that we've been doing for the last quarter. After the session, there's been a lot of cleanup work, but really, we're really looking forward at moving the department forward and setting the stage for some changes that really support a lot of the initiatives that I've spoken with you about as board members and spoken with industry members about. And so having the department support some of these initiatives, such as helping the ag industry grow, bringing more light to the ag industry, cleaning up some of the programs, making sure they're a little bit more effective and makes it easier for industry to do business with us, those kinds of things. So in order to do that, we undertook a strategic planning session. The leadership of the department went off-site for 3 full days and worked on a strategic plan, of which then we're going to present to the board members at the December meeting, I hope. We'll have it completely formatted and ready to go by then. And we're really excited to see what you think and hear your feedback and to see where we think we should be going in the next couple of years to meet some of our goals. We've outlined it was a great conversation. A lot of the division administrators and I and the deputy director all felt aligned in where we need to go. So it was a wonderful planning session, and we're looking forward to presenting that to you at the December board meeting. So moving on to partner coordination, the Department of Ag has been involved in Wildfire Summit Planning Committee meetings. This was born out of the legislative session. Assemblywoman Swank got together wildfire planning meetings during the legislative session, and really to look at all of the ways that not only the state agencies but the federal agencies work together when it comes to wildfire mitigation, wildfire response, and then of course wildfire rehabilitation. And so because of that meeting, the legislature did grant some funds for this next interim to look at wildfire before, during, and after to see how we can, solving the problem seems like an overreach, but, to at least tackle, potentially some of the problems of why we have these massive wildfires throughout Nevada and what we can do to respond to them quicker and to do a better job of rehabilitation on the back end. And so there's going to be a wildfire planning summit coming up this fall in which all of the agencies are together to be able to make a plan and figure out how we're going to spend some of those funds in best use possible. And so really it's state agencies and federal agencies working together to be able to tackle these large-scale problems. So we have a lot to participate and a lot to add to these conversations, and so we're looking forward to being part of it going forward.
What would be the, Mr. Chairman, could I just ask a question on that? What would be the role of the Department of Agriculture? Are we providing some funding into this situation, or is it really be staff support, or what would it be?
So the way that I see it is mainly staff knowledge, staff support. The funding comes from the legislature; it doesn't come from the State Department. I'm not sure how the funding will come through, if it'll be funneled through a specific department or if the committee itself will be funded. I'm not sure how that will work yet. The way I see it is that we have a lot to contribute on the mitigation portion of it when it comes to weeds and to working with ranchers and farmers on potential fire breaks, and those kinds of issues on the mitigation portion. I don't know that we have too much to contribute on the response, on the action during the fire, but then certainly after the fire we have some responsibilities there as far as what is being seeded, working with farmers to make sure that there is enough seed available to be able to rehabilitate some of those lands. So before and after, I think, is mostly where our responsibilities lie.
Jeff?
Yes.
A comment.
Yes.
I think if we manage our land a little bit better and allow people to go in there and graze and use the livestock, like Pete's got sheep and they eat that stuff right down to the ground. We got to take care of the combustible material. And that's where I think we ought to go back to, and they do it very successfully in some other areas. And I noticed even in Carson City they had goats and things like that are allowed to graze. And I don't know if we can do something like that, but I really think that is what we should concentrate on and reduce the combustible material before the fire even starts.
Right. So there's a lot of work being done in that area of the grazing, outcome-based grazing. There's grazing for fuel reduction. So from the conversations that I've had, specifically BLM and U.S. Forest Service, right? I mean, those are the big landholders in the state of Nevada. Really understand this, and the folks in Nevada are really interested in employing some of those tactics. However, decisions have to be made on the federal level to be able to employ that. The U.S. Forest Service is currently putting together, actually they've already put together the project of getting data on sheep grazing for fire resistance over several acres. So it's not a small project, it's actually a quite large project in different areas of Nevada. And I think that once those results come in, those will then inform policy change on a national level, which I'm really looking forward, which I think will help. So I think that there has been a lot of conversation. There's been a lot of conversation, right?
Yep.
And there's been a lot of groups that have been active in this realm, but then now the data is starting to come in, and then when the data comes in, that's when the policy comes in.
I know a ranch up in Elko. When I was a little boy, I was lucky enough to go to the Department of Agriculture. My dad was the chairman. And we went up there to talk to Stanley Ellison and what he does, and he was helping. Amazing. Had his sheep herders and the sheep all in these areas, and they talked about the fires. And those sheep actually kept the growth down and prevented, I'm sure, a lot of fires. And I just don't think we're giving the sheep or goat or even cattle, you know, the cows don't graze it down quite as much, but I think almost, if you gave those permits away, it would benefit the state and it would prevent fires.
Mr. Dufresne.
Jennifer, who's all on this committee? I see all the different outfits, but I mean, is that you, or is there somebody, do you have a full-time person working on this?
It's not a full-time person. The committee currently is meeting sporadically to plan for the summit.
Okay,
And
so the summit as
yes, so I'll be attending the summit. We'll have other staff attending the summit as well. And then hopefully what comes out of the summit is some action plans to move forward.
So then it'll be okay.
Yeah.
Mr. Varner.
Just a comment. Like most of us in here in the grazing industry that sit on this board, I've seen this happen over the last 50 to 60 years. The livestock industry in the state of Nevada has been cut between 60 and 70% of their numbers. And now you're seeing all these catastrophic fires, where before they had fires, but they were small fires. They was easily contained because the understory and the forage that drove those fires was taken off. And the last 50 to 60 years, the state has done absolutely nothing to stop the reduction in AUMs and the reduction of livestock in the state of Nevada. And that's one of the reasons I got on this board, because I would like to see the state actually step up and take a more aggressive role in the face of the federal agencies that are cutting the grazing allotments to nothing. I mean, they just don't. The state don't. And it impacts the state financially and in other ways. I mean, it just does.
To us, we believe, I think, that it's a real simple solution. Go back to what we used to do. It's just like, it's so simple. It's pathetic because we get so many of these bureaucrats in here kind of keeping, you know, wanting to reduce down the herds, the cattle, everything else. And it's just a real easy solution.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and let Director Ott finish with her report here.
Sorry about the interruption.
No, you're fine. I attended, Deputy Director attended, and our trade coordinator also attended the WASDA, the Western Association of State Departments of Agriculture meeting. This is a meeting where all of the Western state directors get together and discuss issues specific to agriculture in the Western states, and also vote on some policies that then will be funneled up to the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. And so the two policies at the table for WASDA was one on for encouraging USDA to provide more funding for voluntary conservation land improvements. And so that's looking at encouraging them through maybe the Farm Bill process or other appropriation funding to provide more funding to farmers and ranchers for land conservation. And then the second policy that we voted on was to participate in the invasive weeds action plans with Western states. And so that was brought forth through Montana and Nevada had worked on it very early on, but that was really an action plan that showed, it laid out who would be responsible for what as far as moving across state borders and tackling the invasive weed problems and sharing resources on how we can tackle some of these invasive weed problems that are across borders. And so those were the two policies that were voted on at the WASDA conference. And of course, Nevada participated in those votes and approving those that were interested in more funding from USDA and interested in invasive weed coordination. So speaking about post-fire rehabilitation, I've participated in meetings with U.S. Forest Service, BLM, and NRCS. This was something that I've been wanting to do for quite some time. I think that what I'm hearing from our previous wildfire discussions around the table, there's a bit of a frustration about the slow-moving nature of the response sometimes, and I share those frustrations with you. And so I called this meeting among these federal agencies because really I had just wanted to tackle one issue. You know, not plan on an issue, just let's identify an area and tackle it and throw resources at it and collaborate and see what we can do. And so we have identified on the Paradise Valley area and areas where the Martin Fire were to eradicate that of noxious weeds and to reseed with natural plants. And so working together to plan and hire somebody to coordinate that, to receive some of the federal funding, to help farmers and ranchers to get some of the NRCS EQIP funding to be able to tackle those land issues there, so that we can, you know, take an area that's, whether it's 100 acres or 1,000 acres, and call it a success story, so that we can learn from that and then grow that project is really what we're looking to do there. So I'm really excited about how fast we've been able to put this together, and we'll hopefully have some successes to report in the next couple of board meetings. So,
Mr. Chairman? Yes, sir. If I could ask a question. Since we won't be talking about wildfire anywhere besides this, I say, you know, I know you said planting back, you know, post with rehab with native plants. You know, it is everybody that's looked out there that has been up and actually see the response. Some of the non-native plants are the ones that are fire resistant. So I would really encourage you not to get too locked in
down
with the native plants, because for one thing, the cost of the seed, the viability of those non-native species, and their resistance, they tend to stay greener later into the season, much later into the season than a lot of the native plants do. So we'll see fires hit up to a crested wheat season.
I was going to say, I will hold up a crested wheat slide for you.
Know, but, you know, it'll burn up to that and burn maybe a little mosaic through it, or stop it altogether. But everything else is black, you know, from this mountaintop to that one. So I would encourage you to keep beating that crested wheat drum.
Okay, heard. I heard. And then moving on to the other major issue that has come up is also the Fallon Naval Air Station expansion. I just wanted to touch on that. So we are waiting for their final impact statement coming up in December. That's not out yet. But the state agencies have, and the counties as well, NACO is involved, and all of the counties are involved as well, have gotten together to provide a response and a counter proposal to the Fallon Air Station expansion, especially for some of those grazing lands that will be lost, and encouraging the Navy to speak individually with each one of the ranchers. There's only 11 of them. But the 11 that are impacted very severely, and so we're still in conversations with the Navy to mitigate the loss that our ranchers in that region will feel due to the expansion. So we've been working on that, and I am going to let you go ahead and read the rest of these, and I'm always available for questions. And I just wanted to say that I'm looking forward over the next couple of months to visiting each one of your areas throughout the late fall and winter. I'll be doing meetings with industry in each of the areas of the state of Nevada. I'm calling them town hall meetings. I don't know if that's really the right word for it, but and so I hope that I will be able to see all of you there, and a lot of the ag community as well, so that we can talk about some of the issues that we're facing.
So before we move on to the next item here,
yes.
First let me ask, any questions so far in the director's report? So I do want to talk about a success story. Over the last couple of weeks, our industry in this region saw some potential for a serious issue with a fuel shortage. And we actually have one of our industry representatives here that helped us out. But I just want to share with you guys because it was the perfect case of industry working together along with governmental agencies to make it right. So it was working with Cadence in her department, Director Auden overseeing it and connecting with other departments. From the directors or the governor's office to Department of Energy. But it was the perfect solution, the perfect, if you will, scenario of what could have gone poorly was going into a holiday week, one of the busiest travel times for our region here, and potentially we would have been out of gasoline. So associations in our industry that normally butt heads were coming together along with all these agencies to fix the problem, and likewise it was averted. So I just want to commend the department and staff for their assistance as well as industry representatives that were very helpful. With that being said, I just want to make sure that we as board members realize that we do represent an industry. And likewise, I encourage you to, if you haven't already done this several times before, reach out to the different associations, the different companies and organizations that are in your industry to make sure that they feel comfortable connecting with you if they have questions or concerns that would come back to the Department of Ag. Likewise, I want to encourage you, instead of going directly to staff, when you have these, please bring them to the director's attention, and then she will divvy it up from there on who will be addressing it. Director, anything you wish to add or clarify?
No, I'm always happy to take your phone calls, so please.
To the point where she is strongly encouraging each and every one of us to get her involved. Yep. So with that being said, I just want to say thank you, because it would have been an embarrassing situation last week if our community ran out of fuel during all the events that were going on here in this region. So thank you, everyone. Okay, we'll move on to 4B, Department Governance Policy Approval.
All right. So in front of you, if you're looking online, you may not have the full updated copy yet. There's just a quick date change. And Laura's passing out the updated copy. The effective date was 2020, and it actually should be 2019. So there's no wording changes, it's just a date change here. But per Nevada Revised Statute 561.105, the Board of Agriculture establishes policy for the Department of Ag. And because of the strategic planning that we went through, and just in reviewing how we are handling internal operations, we have decided to review all of our policies and procedures that are happening that we use to run the department. Some are quite out of date. And so what we're bringing forth to you, and what the Deputy Director will bring forth to you later on, is policies that will guide the procedures that we use to run the department. And so this may seem like a very small thing, but this is actually really very important for us to be able to run the department, to be able to set procedures, and to be able to establish guidelines of operation. And so what you're looking at here is a governance policy. It's how we are handling all policies going forward. So we're ensuring that all policies accompany a procedure that is approved by the leadership team and enhances operational efficiency, reduces risk, and facilitates compliance with all applicable state and federal laws, regulations, and codes, and the State Administrative Manual, which is the guidelines of which state departments operate under. The policy will make certain that all policies and procedures ensure fiscal responsibility are saved digitally in a manner that identifies each policy and procedure's progression, and will ensure all policies and procedures are easily accessible to staff and the public, and that all policies are fairly and consistently applied. And so what this really, this governance allows us to do is, under this, we will create the policies going forward to be approved by the board, of which you'll see later on in the board agenda, so that way we can, again, revise operations and revise how the department is run. And so what we're looking for here is an approval of this policy by the board so that we can move forward.
Okay, this is an action item, but before we go to that, do we have any questions from the board? Mr. No.
Yes, Paul No, the record. Is this going to be just revision of current policies, or will it be adding new policies?
So this...
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, so this governance policy is actually new. Policies coming up, like the one that's going to be presented later, is a revised policy. And so this governance policy is new, and what this governance policy is it governs the distribution and maintenance of all other policies. And so this is the overarching one, which is new. We haven't had that before. The uniform policy is the one that's coming up. I think that in the past, the board has been presented with policies that were 3 pages, 4 pages long, were incredibly specific. And if we wanted to make any changes, such as an agriculturalist 3 actually needs 5 shirts to wear in the field instead of being issued only 4 shirts, we were going to have to bring that before the board. And we didn't want to have to do that to you guys anymore. We wanted you to be able to look at the policies as an overarching direction and not the specific direction. And so they are a revision. This one is not. This one's new. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah, so this is basically giving you the authority to make those changes within the the department.
What this does is saying that we're ensuring that all policies are going to be fairly applied. They're going to be available to all staff and the public. That all policies are going to be making sure that we're addressing efficiency, that we're reducing risk, and that we're following state laws. So that's what you're looking at here.
Thank you.
And for those of you that may be concerned also, I just want to point out what it says under responsibilities, shall uphold the policy set forth by the Board of Agriculture. So it's not that the director is trying to take away control, she's just trying to ease the load of some of the things that aren't so important. Okay, any other questions? It is an action item, so if we have someone that's willing to make a motion, that would be wonderful.
I'll make a motion to approve the Nevada revised statutes 561.105 policy.
Second. So Mr. Worthington made the motion, second by Mr. No. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. And with that, we'll move on to item number 5, food and nutrition board update. Good morning, Homer. Oh, hold on.
So I apologize, I should have had this in my director's report, but I wanted to just make everybody aware, you might have already noticed that there's been, we've changed the template for the board report, and that is due specifically to the conversations that I've had with board members regarding the effects on industry, some more information on operations and things like that. And so what you'll be seeing from each of the division administrators is the new format of the board report that lays out, any items of significance that might be affecting the industry. Then we'll do the program reports, and that towards the end is what we're calling the deep dive. So very specific information about some items that the division administrators have determined has been most important to the industry. And so that's the way that the new format is going, so any feedback on that towards the end of the board meeting would be great, so.
Thank you.
Good morning. For the record, Homa Anosha, Food and Nutrition Division Administrator. As Director Ock mentioned, we have changed the template, so I start with the pending matters of significance for Food and Nutrition Division. On July 23rd, USDA proposed a regulation change to the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, previously known as food stamps, and that is going to impact our students who are receiving food, free and reduced lunch. And I explained this a little bit more in depth at the end. With regard to community nutrition, my staff on child and adult care food program, they visited Imagination Station and they found a lot of serious deficiencies. Then they went for the second time to make sure whether those deficiencies have been corrected, and they saw a lot of improvement, but some of those still persist. So they're working with them, and the goal of working is to help them to correct current deficiencies and also prevent them from this happening in the future. And it is very significant because if they don't correct these deficiencies, they're going to put on the national disqualified list. That means for 7 years they're not able to come back to our organization. So we are really working with them to prevent that from happening.
Would you explain what Imagination Station actually is and its function?
Sure. These are the organizations that we provide food or cash to them, and they have sub-recipients, and they provide adult and child care program. They provide access to food and decrease some food insecurity.
So that's actually on the ground where it happens.
And they are on the groundwork, and we are reviewing them on a regular basis, and this is the only program we can do unannounced visits. And so we go unannounced to see whether they're meeting our requirement, are they really compliant with our rules and regulations. And what they have found that they had no record-keeping mechanism there. They didn't know, they weren't following the meal pattern, because also we have requirement of what kind of food they can serve to our adult or children. So we help them to correct those deficiencies, and then we go and we give them a few months, and then we go again unannounced to see whether they have corrected those. And based on what my staff said, they have been correcting a lot of deficiencies, but still there are a lot to go for. And at this point because we have one organization that they can have other organizations under their umbrella, and this is the only organization that in Imagination Station, but there are 3 others that are going to join, and if this one goes on the list, the other 3 cannot join. So anything under their umbrella cannot join.
Thank you. And before you move on, how many organizations do you oversee like that throughout the country?
Well, we have, I get 64 organizations, and there are hundreds under those organizations, so hundreds of sites.
So if it's a sub-site, and their deficiencies are there, it wouldn't be impacted by whoever they're under, would it? It would be, say for example, if you're the primary, and I'm a sub under you, and what I'm doing isn't appropriate and I get shut down, that wouldn't affect you, would it?
The one on the top?
Yeah.
Actually, it does, because they are in charge of those.
Oh.
They are responsible to make sure they are meeting the
all the way
requirements.
down.
Exactly. So that's why it's significant, because if one goes on the list, the others go on the list too for 7 years. And I asked my staff, can they appeal? And they said they can, but it may take that long to go back on the list because of how many steps they have to go through.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
In terms of partnership activities, we are working with tribal chairpersons and USDA specialists in rural and tribal affairs to make sure we provide information and access to child and adult care food program for our Western Shoshone and Shoshone tribes, because we've seen And all of this is an effort for us to expand participation in our programs and also reduce food insecurity in Nevada statewide. So we are collaborating with the tribal communities to bring more children for after school and during school programs. And also we are conducting training for one of our larger sponsors that has 7 organizations under them, and 3 family daycare, because again we want to provide access. The problem is that some organizations don't know about our child and care food program, and also they don't know how to get into that program. It's a process to get under that program. So it is an effort on our part to make sure we are collaborating with different organizations to make sure they're coming under our umbrella and feeding more children and adults under CHFD and summer food programs.
Yes, sir.
Manager Brass, are these different organizations that are contracted to do this food service, are they regulated? In other words, do they have a cap on what they can actually spend on administrative? Is there some kind of regulation that, I guess what I'm getting at is, they're not just taking the cream off the top and the people at the bottom, they're taking 30–40% of the funding that they're getting.
No, mostly they get food actually. We provide food and some money, a small amount of money for administrating the program. And part of the money also goes for auditing. They have to hire auditors to audit, to make sure that they are meeting our requirement and they are spending money based on what we require, and then we review the auditors' results, verify and make sure that they are spending money based on requirement of the program. It's very stringent.
Thank you.
I was going to say, if I may, this industry is incredibly highly regulated. If you think animal industry is regulated, you haven't met food and nutrition. So we have auditors on staff that go through all of the different entities that we're working with. Federal auditors come into the state and,
So there's federal funding that goes into this too then?
It's all federal.
It's all
federal. Oh, it's all federal.
Okay. Everything in food and nutrition is federal. There is no state funding in food and nutrition. It's all federal. And as the director mentioned, it's highly regulated, and also we get there is every 3 years the Department of Agriculture comes and audit us in addition to our internal auditing. So it's
question, thank you.
every 3 years. Also, we are collaborating with Department of Health and Human Service, Division of Health and Behavior, and Division of Public and Behavioral Health. There was a study by Division of Behavioral Health that they realized the child care centers, especially early childhood centers, that are on CACSB program, they show less obesity signs than the ones that are not. So they reached out to us if we can help them. So we are collaborating with them to provide training for early childhood center programs, make sure that, because most of them, they think, again, because of regulation, it's really hard to come under this program. So we are streamlining the process. We are hoping to bring more. And at this point, we have 204 facilities under CACSB, but we are thinking about increasing them by projecting within 5–10% increase, hopefully over the next year. We are also collaborating with Governor's Council on Food Security Policy Committee, Subcommittee, and mostly, again, the purpose is to provide access and also information to our program and our food, and also try to have strategies that minimizes both food insecurity and also food waste. And now we get to our audit service. We have audit staff on board that they are working on all our program, making sure that everything is based on the requirement and nothing is out of compliance. And the first one is conducted retail survey, price survey. That's for milk. And general search for 31 locations in southern and northern areas. And also, our audit services, they do single audit for the organization that get more than $750,000. So that's the one that I was talking about, that they have to have a CPA to do the audit and then send it to us, and we have to verify that. If they are under 750,000, then our auditors are going to review those programs. School nutrition, we have 140 sites that were approved to operate Seamless Summer program, and some Seamless Summer program is a program that provides free meals for the school kids during the summer. And in the school area, we also approved 15 community eligibility provision sponsor application. We have now representing 314 out of 345. And CEP is a program that allows the schools to serve free breakfast and free lunch to all students free of charge. And that really decreases the burden of application and, families providing documentation for us. And this is for high poverty areas. And Nye County is the first district in Nevada to become district-wide CEP. So Nye County provides free lunch to eligible students for the entire school if their school has 40% or more rates of poverty. So this is actually great because, again, it reduces food security in Nevada, which is our ultimate goal.
And if I may break in here, the reasons why we've had an increase is because the Food and Nutrition Division developed systems inside the Department of Agriculture to streamline the process. And so if you enroll at one point, then they let us know so that then they're automatically enrolled so they don't have to fill out more paperwork. So the increase has purely been on the administration side due to administering the programs and working with the other departments. And so it's not because there's a greater need. The need is still great, but it's purely because we've been able to reduce and streamline the paperwork process. So
yeah, through break certification also that throughout the program. But overall, we are seeing.
Hold on just a moment, Mr. Scratch.
As we read through this, it's a little confusing for us that are not involved with it on a daily basis, especially the acronyms, which I mentioned before. But is there an overlap in any of these programs? It seems like there's a lot of these programs give a very similar description of what they're supposed to do. Is there overlap or duplication?
No, we have child nutrition programs. And child nutrition is two different programs, community nutrition and school nutrition. The first part that I was explaining, it was community nutrition, which is for the community, for a child and adult care program, summer food. And for the only overlap you see here is the summer, that either they provide summer food and access to food in summer through our summer food program or through our school nutrition program through Seamless Summer. So that's the only overlap we see. Other than that, it's a community nutrition and it's a school children and also community. But there is an overlap for the summer because both we provide access through school and through our community nutrition because there is a safety for those kids have no place to go in summer shift. And also we notified 253 Nevada schools to serve breakfast after the bell, which is increased to from 232 in 2019. And so you see here the school nutrition, where we talked about summer food and also community nutrition, and the program update we talked about summer food. Again, we provided summer food, but summer food here is provided through different entities, and we said so far it's only for the month of July, and the reason we don't have August because we give them 60 days to submit a report to us. So this is only for the month of July, and we served over 175,000 meals in summer, and we had our average daily attendance was 6,000. And in our food distribution program, we have senior farmers market that every year at the beginning of the summer we distribute coupon to our farmers, to our citizens to go to the farmers market and get fresh food. And as you see, we had over 5,000 coupons and worth of $153,000. And this is only one shot during the summer, and the one for Southern Nevada ended on July 31st, and it continues for Northern Nevada through September. For the food safety, I just have a report of it, because that's really what they do mostly. They do inspection to make sure that the food safety is following the compliance. So, as you see, we have, it's just a statistic, we had inspected dairy farms, food processing plants, bulk meat haulers, milk tank runs, and meat poultry, and also we check a store for illegal products such as raw milk in the form of food for either pets or human consumption. So, in the impact of industry, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, that there is a proposed regulation from Department of Agriculture, and during Obama administration, they expanded the SNAP for people who have income 185 to 200. The administration is trying to roll back to what it was before, and that means people who have been who are going to be dropped from SNAP, if they are not getting any other assistance, public assistance, such as temporary assistance for the families or food distribution on Indian reservation or Medicaid, they are automatically dropped from.
Muted unless you want to speak. We were getting some background noise there from, I believe it was from your side.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and call the meeting back to order. We're recording, all is good.
Okay. For the record, Homa Ownership Food and Nutrition Division Administrator. And the last item is that has impact on our industry is the trade mitigation, and that continues to double the amount of food we are getting from USDA, and we are distributing that to our food bank through emergency food assistance program. And as a result, the food bank partners have added more distribution sites, but the downside to it, we have to have a plan for transition when this program ends. So we are working with our food bank partner to see what's the strategy after this, the amount of food is going to be go back to the amount that was before. We don't know without any specifics. We know that this trade mitigation is going to continue until the first quarter of the calendar year 2020. But so far, the food is coming, and we are feeding more people, and we are happy with that.
And so if I understand correctly, there's not an exact date. It's just at some point it's going to come to an end?
Yeah, and actually I was in a meeting with USDA last week. They said it may actually expand to school nutrition. So it may go for national school lunch programs, because there are a lot of food that, and the unfortunate thing is that a lot of agencies are returning the food trucks because they don't either have the facility to keep them or the ability to distribute them. So far, we haven't returned anything. Everything that has offered to us.
All right, board, any questions for Homa? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we're going to move to number 6, Plant Industry Board Update. Ashley Jepson. Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, Ashley Jepson, Plant Industry Administrator, almost 4 months strong. Woo! Andre's going to steal my glory with history. So kind of for the new format, I'll try to just go over some upper level stuff. I mean, anything that was included, I clearly think you guys should be informed on, but some of the partnerships that we've had established for a while, I'll blaze over. If you guys want me to go in depth on anything else, just let me know. So to kind of start, hemp has been our monster crop over the last few months. We've received a plethora of additional applications this year and continue to see applications coming in, which is surprising at this stage in production. And with that, we're with the number of additional applications that we received, we're seeing the major concerns of cross-pollination. So we did propose an emergency regulation that is currently on the governor's desk to try to address this specific issue. That if there is a cross-pollination issue that would create an economic or genetic purity issue, that we would be able to deny or potentially revoke certification. This has been expressed fairly extensively from the industry, that they want some form of protection because they're investing a lot of money, and then somebody can come right next to them that isn't roguing out their males, and there's a pollination issue, and it's costing them a lot of money. So that's the direction we've gone, and we're waiting on that response to see which direction it goes. We've experienced a couple legal issues within the hemp program as well. These both took place in Nye County. We had two folks that were registered to produce hemp, but not at the actual locations where they were found handling it. So they were unregistered sites operating, and they were both rated by Nye County, and they're under investigation with them. We're taking action on our level to revoke their existing licensure based on not following those requirements that were present. And you can imagine some of the other corresponding issues that would happen with falsifying sites. So those are still in the works. We have not gone to hearing, but they're scheduled. So into pesticides, some of you may have heard about some of the neem oil issues that are ongoing. I believe it started in Oregon. They detected some undeclared ingredients in neem oil pesticides. They were differing manufacturers, but again, they weren't listed on the label, so Oregon specifically took a stop sale action. We experienced something similar in that we were resampling, I believe, a marijuana establishment, and they weren't entirely sure where this detection had popped up for a pesticide that they weren't using, and we saw that they were using neem oil. So we ended up taking that container and we did some random market samples of various products. I believe we took 7 market samples and tested those, and several of them did flag for ingredients that were not listed. So we've been working with EPA on how best to handle this. I will say we're trying to handle this delicately because the amounts that are present in the concentrates are quite low. So even what would actually pop up in a residue sample would be extremely, extremely low. So we're trying to work with primarily with the National Organics Program to identify whether it would impact their status, and also the Organic Material Review Institute and other entities that are labeling these products as organic approved, to make sure that it's not creating an issue for our organic growers. So that's in the works. We'll continue to kind of look at what's happening, and other states are seeing similar things in neem oil. Again, very, very low concentrations, but still it raises the issue of what's happening. We're still working through updating some of our NRS to reflect some new federal regulations. With that, we're still kind of experiencing some issues with new requirements for including the exams for those that are applying, that are working under a landscape license that might be applying pesticides or advertising for applying pesticides. One of the issues we're really hearing from industry is, of course, they need to know the EPA label for public safety reasons, of course, but a lot of those labels are not available in Spanish. So, for interpretive reasons, that's been a bit of a hurdle. So we're trying to work with industry to come up with some potential solutions on how to ensure that their employees know how to properly use that product per the label. So that's ongoing, and it's going to take some time to work through. In terms of some of our partnerships, we did have a Senate Bill 209. We had a few Senate bills that were in the works for hemp. Senate Bill 347, which is basically updating our regulations to reflect the new Farm Bill. And then we had one that was a little bit different, Senate Bill 209, which basically aligned or designated what the Department of Agriculture will be required to do in terms of ensuring that products are labeled, CBD products specifically, and then also under the State Health Division in terms of processed products. So the concern here is a lot of potential fraud that could be taking place in the industry where there's actually no CBD oil present whatsoever, or whether it's actually compliant. So they were pushing for a bill to be established where there's actual labeling and some checks and balances to ensure that that product has been tested with a level of concentrations. So we're working with State Health to kind of give them some insight on what we've seen in the CBD industry, because they will be handling all the processed products. We'll still be handling the raw ag products, so it really didn't actually make many changes for us, but we want to make sure that, again, State Health is kind of aware of industry practices and that we're working with them to make sure that this is successful as they develop their regulations. In the August Interim Finance Committee, we did get a position approved through, it'll be an MDA position, but in partnership with NDOT. NDOT is actually providing the funding to support this position, and it's basically to provide weed mitigation strategies along our highways. So the incumbent will be establishing plans for different projects, making sure that they actually fall within the needs of our noxious weeds program, and they'll be working between the two agencies. So have the expertise of our noxious weeds staff, but also working in conjunction with a major source through NDOT. So we appreciate that. They'll be providing about $95,000 annually over the next 10 years. So it's a long-term, exciting movement that we'll be seeing.
Dr. Spratling?
Where will you have the accountability to actually do something on the ground, or to have a result that we want on the ground? Where will that fall?
The accountability?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it'll be falling between both agencies. I mean, we'll be having to ensure that those plans are actually working, monitoring, working with the contracts to ensure that they're actually meeting the provisions of their contracts.
So it'll be through contractors mainly?
Yes, with this position overseeing those and approving them.
Because the state highways, county roads, and railroads are the worst, are absolutely the worst properties we have to do.
And I think NDOT picked up on that, which is why they wanted to work with us, since we have a better understanding.
And one of the things that came out of our strategic planning process is the accountability on certain program areas, and noxious weeds is one of them. And so we're doing a full NRS and NAC review on all of our programs to see if there's certain programs, like noxious weeds would be one of them, that need more accountability to be able to take action on those kinds of problems.
All right, thank you.
I'm going to jump into our partnership with BLM. We did secure a $50,000 grant this last month, which is exciting because we are trying to develop more native and wild and seed type programming. So this specific grant will allow for a seasonal staff to be hired to do some monitoring of sites and actually secure more of a seed bank, so we can work with some of our partners through NRCS, BLM, so forth, to establish more of a native and wild and seed bank. This is a work in progress. We're hoping to work more with our growers and with NDOW for some potential funding opportunities that might be present that can actually contract with some of our growers and establish a market, a local market, as opposed to getting seed outsourced from the state. So this is at least a step in the right direction to provide staff to start establishing the seed bank that they need to actually move forward. All right, I'm going to jump back into hemp a little bit. So we'll move on to crops unless folks have any questions about some of the other items that are kind of more touching base on some of the partnerships that we've further established.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. All right, so back into crops.
Hang on just a second.
Sure.
Mr. Frey, did you have a question?
Well, I did.
Okay, go ahead.
Maybe ask, could you explain the difference between the white rot and the pink rot?
Sure.
Is it, and white rot's more of a problem?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And I almost pulled that out of there because I didn't want to create confusion. It was more of if somebody in here specifically was working in allium production that they would be able to flag that, oh, well, that's kind of an ongoing issue that we're seeing in the industry. It's not even remotely reflective, and perhaps Jim can jump in, compared to the white rot issue. The white rot issue in particular is a major problem because it is creating, it's very challenging to get rid of. It stays in the soil for a really long time. it's contagious, so a lot of our growers are actually producing for seed. So then that's contaminating other production areas, other seed banks as it's mixed. Gerlach area, I believe, it pretty much decimated a lot of the production that was in that general area, and the pink root rot is not.
Okay, how are they controlling that now? And are they still fumigating the fields or I heard of mustard weed, and I guess that's not working quite as well.
So for white rot specifically?
Well, to eradicate the problem, they plow in mustard weed and then produces the mustard gas that kills the white rot. Is that true?
I wish I could speak on that more. Frankly, I'm not entirely sure if that's a process. I know what we do is once we flag it, it has to be quarantined and it can't go back into allium production essentially.
Okay.
So a huge part of it is our survey work. We have a lot of staff out there identifying it, flagging it off, putting it in quarantine and monitoring those areas pretty extensively, which is why topaz I flagged on the report as an issue, but maybe...
Mr. Schneider actually won the speed.
A couple of things, going back to the pink root. Pink root is very widespread and very common and costly. And there's really no good control but other than resistant varieties of onions. On white rot, as far as white rot control or eradication, I don't think there is such a thing as eradication. I think what they're using most commonly now for suppression are different garlic or onion products, garlic oil, garlic powder, that sort of thing, to stimulate germination of the white rot sclerotia in the absence of a host for it to feed on. And that, as far as I know, that's about the best we can do at this point. And eradication is just not there.
Impossible.
Yeah, as far as I know.
Okay, quarantining a field with white rot. If you walk into it, you can pass it to the next field, right? So when you quarantine it, what happens? I mean, how do you protect the next fields over the next farm?
So they're supposed to, I believe, have somewhat, I'm again, jump in, Jim, if I'm off. They're supposed to have some level of buffers. It's really, we highlight where the area is and they provide a plan for how they're going to mitigate that specific issue. Might be a little different for each person. The good thing is it's in their interest to prevent the further spread if they want to keep in, so they might have, fairly diligent processes in place. It's not an easy feat, yeah.
I think one of the primary things we do to prevent spread is sanitation of equipment, moving from field to field, and that seems to go a long ways to prevent spread. We don't seem to have a problem with it being spread by livestock or birds or anything, although that's certainly theoretically possible.
And I'm happy to gauge too from the program coordinator if there's anything else interesting that folks might be doing to mitigate, if that's helpful.
Go ahead. Right. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So in the crops, just to kind of get an update, we are up to, let's see, this year we went from, in 2018, roughly 1,900 acres, and we're already surpassing about 14,000 acres. So you can see the surge that we've had just in this last year. We've doubled the number of growers, producers. We're still fairly close on handlers. That means that a lot of sampling. Most of these growers were sampling per variety. Most of them are growing several different varieties, so they want to see where things are testing at and then kind of look at what's doing well here. But with that, it's requiring extensive samples to be submitted to our office. So we're expecting about 600 hemp samples to be run. That might be actually an underestimate, so we're gearing up and we have plans for how to get these results back to folks fairly quickly, because if they're not compliant with the THC levels, we need to get back to them real fast in case there's resampling. And I should have highlighted in that Senate Bill 209, it did establish provisions where the Department of Ag, we have to go out and resample, or at least offer that as an opportunity for folks, just in case, something may have changed in their crop before actually taking that next level of crop destruction. which happens if it's over that 0.3%. So there's been,
I do have a question. So how are you doing on staffing? With this kind of an increase, how can you stay on top of it?
it's been a work in progress. We're trying. We did just get a full-time hemp position approved through this last August interim finance committee, which was thrilling. So that position will actually be the program coordinator, and we've essentially pulled staff from other programs to try to keep meeting the demand. Most of which has been from our produce safety team, where a lot of the activities in terms of education are in the wintertime, so they've been able to provide quite a bit of support over the summertime. But there'll be more and more needs. We've also hired manpower staff to be able to get out and do the sampling quicker than what we've been able to do in the past. We're going to have to keep looking at options to meet that growing need. So one of the big issues that we've experienced this year is the new Farm Bill specified testing more than the 2014 Farm Bill. So the new Farm Bill specified that it had to been post-decarboxylated THC or an equivalent method. So with that, we were anticipating this happening, and we were letting folks know what they would be testing at. We were letting folks know last year, if these new provisions come into place, this is where you would test at. All this came into effect as of January 1, where the new testing standards are in place. We held several meetings to let folks know. We've issued letters, notices, emails of what direction we're going. It's federal standard. We have to be moving in that direction. The area we had some leniency on is the sampling. The sampling was not fully determined, or was not outlined in the 2018 Farm Bill, nor was there any guidance on what that looked like. Most other states are taking the top few inches, they're taking just the flower. In the past, we had taken the top 6 inches, which is predominantly the flower, which is where the THC and CBD are going to be most concentrated. But we did start to explore, based on some communication that we had from industry, of the diverse uses that might be used from the crop. So we modified our sampling to include equal parts plant, meaning stem, leaf, etc., to equal parts bud. It takes a little bit more time in the field, but gives a better idea of what the diverse uses of the crop might be. So that's been working fairly well, and probably gives them a little bit more buffer in their testing. We have had our, another little update on hemp, we have had our seed, Russell Wilhelm, who previously managed the hemp program, he is still managing the seed portion of it. So folks that are, the seed producers that are growing for the sale of intended seed, he's been going out and looking at the level of buffers that they might have for some of their varietals, because mainly when we actually get applications in, folks are listing who they intend to have supply their seed. So if they're under the impression that it's a fairly pure strain, and we're seeing something a little bit different in the field where there's a large amount of varieties that are mixed in one area and probably a lot of crossbreeding, we're able to at least somewhat track that and let folks kind of know where they're standing, while also providing some technical assistance to what we're learning in the industry and what might benefit the seed industry, because that's, the genetics is a big topic right now, and people want to secure the best genetics they can that thrive in our area. Okay. We talked a little bit about the white rot. We did, we had 2 contaminated fields in Topaz. Topaz has been a reoccurring white rot area over the last few years. Huge seed provider, so we're watching that area pretty closely. And it looks like it's potential that the current seed contractor might remove that contract just out of concern for their business. So we've had a lot of staff out monitoring for this, and they are still finding it, but hopefully detecting it early on where we can control it and keep seeing what happens with our industry. And I'll keep back.
Mr. Snyder.
Yes, you mentioned Botrytis here. Are you detecting Botrytis in onion fields?
In onion fields, I don't know off the top of my head if he did, but I will find out and I can get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
I'm
you.
not sure. But thankfully, we didn't find any white rot in our onion fields. It was isolated to garlic this year, but I will write down that.
Okay.
Any other questions from the board?
Oh, I have one.
Yes. Excuse me, Mr. Noel?
On the neem oil products that you've been testing, are these across the board, are they like national brand manufacturers?
Yes.
Okay.
So that's something that we're trying to work through because EPA would like to do an investigation, but they're putting a lot of pressure on the states to take immediate action. As I mentioned, we're trying to be fairly careful with to make sure that we're not overstepping. But what we are working on is an advisory letter to send out to all neem oil manufacturers to let them know what we're detecting so that they can start surveying for it. Then they can maybe isolate where the issue is and start, either they could declare those ingredients, and that would be one area to address the misbranding, or identify where they might be, where the source of contamination is taking place. But at least then we're communicating with industry. We reached out to EPA to try to encourage that as well. Sounds like they just want our state to do it, so just for the sake of giving everybody a chance to look at it, we'll be sending that letter.
All right, we'll go ahead and move on to B. So you get to, yeah, right in here. So Nevada Seed Council requests authority to expend $2,951.01, not two, from 4554-01 Alfalfa Seed Research and Promotion Account per NRS 587.151 in order to maintain membership accreditation with the National Alfalfa Forage Alliance. And this is an action item.
So as you guys are aware, the Nevada Alfalfa Seed Council was repealed in 2017, but they're working under an association as of right now. So they're the ones that have requested that the funds that are being put into this account be put forward to renewing our membership and covering our assessment fees that are current to date. So that is broken down where $1,451.01 for the membership, and then a donation of $1,500 for silver membership to go to the National Alfalfa and Forage Alliance. Basically, the donation, the membership dues and so forth, they're going towards training, education, resources, extensive research that's taking place for this industry, and this alliance serves as a means of creating some unity among the groups, communicating issues, and then providing resources based on those issues that are presented. So valuable to this group of folks.
Questions?
I'll make a motion to approve it.
Second. Okay, we had a motion made by Mr. Worthington, second by Mr. Higbee. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, passes unanimously. Thank you, Ashley. And we'll move on down to number 7, Administration Board Update. Jared Conrad. Good morning, Jerry.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, board members. I'm here this morning to give an update from the Administration Division. But first I wanted to introduce our new fiscal administrator, Andre Ursi. He joined us in June from the Governor's Finance Office. And his first day was the beginning of a week-long tour through Nevada with the other division administrators, myself, and the director. So he stayed on after that. And we're excited for Andre to be on board here. I have a few things I'm going to cover, and I do have some staff here in case there's any detailed questions from the board. At the moment, we do not have any pending matters of significance or partnership activities from a division overview. However, you'll see in the update that we do have a lot of ongoing partnerships throughout our administrative daily activities. I'll start with agriculture literacy, and Amber Smyer, as most of you are familiar with, she leads our ag literacy efforts, and she's going to pass out some education materials. Just some of them are a reminder. It's been a few years, I think, since some of you saw some of our materials, and then Amber pointed out there's some old school materials that folks still request, educators still request, so we use those. So part of our ag literacy efforts have been providing these materials in back to school. For back to school requests, there's stuff there on, there's activity books on sheep, grains, dairy, meat, and then I'm not sure, the big photos are kind of about general agriculture in the state, so you'll see those come through.
Excuse me, Jerry. So as far as these educators and the students that are getting this information, are we seeing it from one region, or is it throughout the state?
It is throughout the state. We tend to do more outreach where we have staffing because we can get out to do some more events. It's cost effective, but we are seeing requests from across the state, all counties, most of them.
Okay, thank you.
Part of that education includes dairy education, and I love how Amber talks about our dairy herds, which are Melissa, who's up north here, and Monique, who's down south. And so they have been actively attending events with their handlers and educators as well. I guess we have 2 educators now in southern Nevada. Yeah, so that's, as you may recall, that's fairly new to have the cow in the south and be able to attend events and be invited to schools and that kind of thing. Communications-wise, we have been managing media regarding Virginia range feral horses, rabies in bats, promoting the hemp industry and talking about the impacts of growth in that industry, as Ashley mentioned. Grasshoppers, whether they're waxing or waning, has been pretty popular. And then I'll touch a little bit on our international trade and economic development, although you will be hearing from our trade coordinator, Dylan Davison, after I'm done here. So Dylan has been working on, with NAMO, the North American Agriculture Marketing Officials, on comprehensive marketing strategies and research tools to promote Nevada's agriculture worldwide. He's also been working on setting up some missions that will speak to Nevada producers' needs, international missions, and potentially what is the word I'm looking for? Not
Inbound missions?
Inbound missions, thank you. As well, and he can talk to those if you have any questions. But he's really looking at getting to know Nevada producers to see what producers are looking for and how they want to grow, and what aspects of their companies they're looking to potentially use to export and or to partner with somebody via, say, an inbound trade mission. And an example of getting to know them recently is he went on a Northern Nevada tour across, how many hours was your trip? 16 hours. Meeting with alfalfa growers and getting to know them, establishing some relationships, and seeing what their needs are. So that, looking forward to furthering those relationships and seeing where he can help out there. Flavor consultants and Lakeview cheese products, they've fueled trade relations with Vietnam and Malaysia, and Flavor Consultants is a pretty experienced exporter at this point, and we're happy to continue to help them, as well as, again, kind of, the companies who it might be new to and how to get them started. And lastly, Dylan is also working on continuing evaluation of the Buy Nevada program and, kind of determining what is best for Nevada agriculture through that program. Any questions or?
Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Spratling, go ahead.
If a person has an ideas for education, to enlighten the public, how would we go through that process? How would that person try and get that taken care of, or that worked on?
Yeah, so they can contact me, they can contact Amber. Absolutely, we want to hear from folks about any ideas they may have. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Amber Scott has a wide variety of
we'd love to hear.
educational tools and tactics, so it'd be great to hear what folks have to offer.
So I do have a question about the Buy Nevada, and I realize you're going through the evaluation process right now, but does it look like it's been successful? Moderate, very, not so much?
Do you want to?
I'd go towards the not so much end. I mean, that's what we're evaluating, is that, how it was employed with the funding that is available to support the program. How does it make sense to use those funds moving forward? There's several programs, Made in Nevada, Buy Nevada, Nevada Grown. There's several programs out there. Does it make sense to support those programs instead? These are all the things that we're really looking at. And so with, a Buy Nevada program, we have to have a plan, we need to have metrics. How do we determine success? And so that's really what we're looking at, is trying to figure out if we can do that on the funding that we have.
Perfect. Yeah, and that's actually, it seemed like when it was first rolled out, a lot of attention to it. It seemed like it was doing what we wanted, and now it seems kind of like it's on the downhill slide. So.
And part of that is because of the evaluation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Mr.
I
Gray?
have one. Jerry, how are we doing on ag in the classroom? Is that still going along?
It sure is, and
Good.
our Ag in the Classroom representative, Amber, do you want to?
Actually, all of the resources that we share today, we distribute through the Department of Agriculture as part of our Agriculture in the Classroom program. Yes, so there's things that we're creating specifically, such as the little learn sheets about the food groups, and then we're using resources from our partner, like the Sheep AgMag, which is the American Farm Bureau project. So we use all the tools that we can get from all of the industry doing agricultural literacy, and Agriculture in the Classroom is one way that we deliver that. And we do teacher trainings in addition to that.
Do you bring in groups?
Yes, so it depends on the location. We just did one in Elko this past spring, and so they engaged quite a few industry professionals from the Elko, and then I provided them the educational resources that matched educational standards so that they could do activities with the teachers that they could use in the classroom.
Thank you. Any other questions before we move on? All right, Jerry, we'll go to Department Uniform Policy Revision Approval.
Yes, thank you. So as Director Ott mentioned, this is an updated uniform policy, and this update will help guide us in our development for the uniform procedures. So this would replace the last policy, which was signed by the board on June 6, 2018. And I'll go ahead and read the policy if that's okay. Per Nevada Revised Statute 561.105, the Board of Agriculture shall establish the policy of the Nevada Department of Agriculture. The uniform policy shall ensure staff and those working on behalf of the NDA are easily identifiable, are representing the department professionally. The policy shall ensure uniforms are appropriate for the staff's varied work and for seasonal weather conditions as practicable. And so with those guidelines, we'll be able to go through and update our procedures that say, a new employee, with a certain title who meets with the public is allowed to have 3 short sleeve shirts and 2 long sleeve shirts, and they need to contact the accounting assistant 3, who will give them the form to sign out, and they have to have that signed by their supervisor, and so that's kind of the procedural part that isn't attached to this.
Okay, thank you. Board, any questions for Jerry? This is an action item, so anyone wish to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Spratling.
I move that we approve the policy revision, uniform policy revision that is being proposed.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Ms. Lackey, thank you, Heather. All right, those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right, it passes unanimously, thank you.
He wants control of the meeting.
Thank you.
Just a comment.
Yes, sir.
On the uniform thing, I think that's a good idea, because a lot of times, most farmers and ranchers are pretty independent. Some stranger pulls up in a pickup, a white pickup, gets out and starts wandering through whatever they're doing or looking at, and if they don't have a uniform of some kind on, they're gonna either call a sheriff or go run them off.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. That's a great thing.
Good, thank you.
So we'll move on to C, request to expend $695 from the account 4554-01 Alfalfa Seed Research and Promotion account per NRS 587.151 for the Global and Industry Trade Coordinator to attend 2019 Western Alfalfa and Forage Symposium on November 19th through the 21st in Reno in order to better promote and market efforts in Nevada alfalfa. Mr. Davidson, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great, thanks. Glad to have you with us.
So yeah, I was requesting these funds as they're set aside for research and promotion. And in my journey of meeting with the alfalfa producers, one of their biggest concerns or wants from the agency is more market research. And so attending this conference or symposium will give me that opportunity to meet with more producers in the state and talk about what we can do to assist them. And so one of those is forming an alfalfa inbound buyers mission. So working with alfalfa buyers domestically and internationally to meet with the producers on figuring out new market resources of where we can put Nevada alfalfa.
All right. Any questions? And this too is an action item. If you don't have any questions, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve this expenditures of $695 to attend the Alfalfa Forage Symposium November 19th through the 21st in Reno.
All right, thank you.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion made by Mr. Worthington, second by Mr. Frey. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All right. Looks like you're in good shape.
Thank you.
We'll move on to board management, board discussion and possible revision of bylaws. And there's no name, I'm assuming that the director is taking care of this one?
I can take the ball. So, one of the things that was noted as far as board management goes is that our Board of Agriculture doesn't have bylaws. We don't have instructions currently, the board doesn't have instructions currently on how to elect the chair and the vice chair. There's some outlines here referencing NRS as far as purpose, as far as code of ethical standards and training. And so in order to assist the board in giving guidance on elections and other items, we've created this draft for you to review and provide any suggestions or questions or conversation on in order to be able to move forward with an adoption of bylaws for the board.
So what you're saying is we've been willy-nilly all these years.
What am I saying?
All right. Yeah. So I'll open it to the board. Any questions, thoughts, concerns? Mr. No.
I know that in the past it's changed a couple of times, but do notice there's no term limits as far as board members? At one time there was, and then it changed back, and, so is that, something that's not, there are no limits on that?
So, actually on that, as I understand it, it was more, a governor's wish. And at their pleasure, we were serving. So,
okay.
Those were the ones you'd see. Sometimes they would, no more than 2 terms. Sometimes it was multiple terms, just depended on the governor. And,
Okay.
Every time your
Right.
board term is up, you reapply
Right.
to participate on the board, and at that point in time, it's up to the governor at the time.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Was your question more in line with your election of the chairman? Is being multiple?
No, just as a board terms, and that, at certain points with certain governors, we were limited to a certain number of terms, and then you were ineligible after that.
Yes. Any other questions? All right. If anyone so desires, you wish to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the bylaw.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion made by Mr. Frey to approve, and we have the second by Mr. Higbee. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. And it passes unanimously as well. Thank you, Director. Appreciate you keeping us in line.
No more willy-nilly.
No more willy-nilly.
He's like willy-nilly.
All right, we'll move on to number 9, consumer equitability.
Maybe we could split that with you. Oh, hey.
Okay, we have a request to take a quick break.
Absolutely.
So this one, we are gonna time out. So, let's say that we'll be back here at, clock is, let's say in 5 minutes. We'll be back in 5 minutes, all right? Thank you.
I could change that for
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and call the meeting back to order.
Yeah.
And we're on item number 9, consumer equitability with Cadence. Thank you.
Good morning. So good morning, Mr. Chairman and board members. For the record, Cadence Matievich. I have the privilege of serving as the division administrator for the department's division of consumer equitability. As Director Ott shared this morning, working from our new board update template. At the time that I drafted and submitted my board update, it didn't have any pending matters of significance. As your chair shared with you earlier this morning, we did recently have an item arise that was brought to the department's attention by members of the industry that had to do with availability of ethanol in the greater northern Nevada area. And as your chair shared, I think it's a set of circumstances where the consequences could have been quite severe for the community, but all's well that ends well. And certainly, you know, the participation and engagement of industry and notifying us, and then the director's leadership in bringing the proper parties to the table and working through the issues, I think is a great example of the role that the department can play. And maybe not even necessarily there being anything that we needed to do that was within our authority per se, but really just getting the right people at the table to be sure that the needs of our community are met. So that came up and fortunately appears to have resolved itself in that short amount of time. So I'm pleased to report that to you today. As far as partnership activities go, nothing of significance. We do continue our dialogue with the board for the regulation of the liquefied petroleum gas industry, propane. At this time, it doesn't appear that we'll be entering into any kind of a partnership agreement with them, really mostly for fiscal reasons. But we've sort of put that on the table, and continue to work with them for ways for us to collaborate, and expect to revisit that at the point that we've gone through our next set of regulation-making processes and have implemented the second phase of the fee increase that we've discussed with the board previously. At that point, we do think that there will be sufficient funding to enter into that partnership. So certainly we'll keep the board updated on that, but other than that, no real partnership activities of significance to report at this time. In your report are various numbers on the activities of the division in each of our program areas. Fairly early into the fiscal year, which is what these data points measure, our activities since July 1. These are pretty typical year-to-date numbers. Nowhere that I'm seeing an area of concern other than the continued message. I feel it's almost a bit of a broken record at this point. You've heard me say over and over again, the division just continues to struggle to keep up with the growth, particularly in southern Nevada. We see new establishments with weighing and measuring equipment being opened every day or expanding. Our Vegas team is doing a heck of a job trying to keep up with that demand. So those numbers are there. I'm happy to speak to any of those if you have specific questions on any of those activities or any one of those program areas that you'd like me to dive into more deeply. All right. Then with that, I'm going to move into the industry impact section of my report and share with you today, specific to our weights and measures program, some information about the regulation process that we utilize in the division in our activities to monitor, regulate, and enforce in the areas of weights and measures. We have a statutory directive that in adopting our regulations and our rules of practice, that we will, to the extent practicable, adopt regulations that are consistent with other states in our country. And in many cases, those practices and regulations also tie back to international standards as well. This provides benefit for both consumers, is that when they go to conduct a transaction in Nevada that has to do with weighing and measuring, it's not an entirely foreign experience to them than what they may conduct in their home state. Certainly for a state that is as involved in tourism as our state is, that's important. And it also provides benefit to industry that they know that by and large, when they come to Nevada, the same requirements in the world of weights and measures will be the same here as they are in other states. So they're not going to have to buy specialized equipment. They're not going to have to modify their business practices. And so supporting that consistency across the states we think is important, and not the least of which because we have a legislative directive to go about our business in that way. So I have some visual aids here today. In the weights and measures world, we work closely with the National Institute of Standards and Technology. That is a division of the U.S. Department of Commerce, their Office of Weights and Measures, and there are various handbooks. This one kind of being our day-to-day Handbook 44, and other handbooks, Handbook 130, 133, which we as a state adopt by reference in our regulations. So rather than codifying all of this information in Nevada Administrative Code, we take the action to adopt these reference materials, these handbooks by reference in our administrative code. And these serve as the guides for the day-to-day work that our inspectors do when they're out in the field. I was kidding a little bit earlier that this is perhaps the other end of the spectrum from willy-nilly. So very specific directions and examination procedures, sets tolerances and test methodologies that our inspectors use when they're carrying out their work in the field. And the process that's
utilized for the regular review and updating of all of these handbooks. NIST works in conjunction with the National Conference on Weights and Measures. You'll hear it say NCWM. And so it's almost like its own regulatory process, if you will, our own little mini weights and measures legislative sessions. And those cycles begin in the fall of each year. In fact, next week, myself and some of the other division staff will be traveling to Park City for the Western Weights and Measures Association, where proposals that have come in from stakeholders, both industry and regulators, present proposals to amend or add items to these handbooks. Those are vetted through the regional process. The regional committees will hold work sessions on those proposals, talk through the pros and cons, give direction to the sponsor of the item on any further development that needs to take place. And then the conference will join together in January of each year at what's called the interim meeting. At that interim meeting, all the reports from all the regional conferences come together. They're discussed in an open forum. There's open hearings where anyone who has an interest in the particular matter that's under consideration can bring those forward for consideration by the body. At that point, if there's any further development work that needs to happen to that item, the sponsor of the item will take it back, continue that work, and then the conference will meet again at our annual meeting in July of each year. And so this big book here is what's called Publication 16, and this is published annually. There's a 15 that's for the interim meetings and a 16 that's for our annual meetings. And this is reports from the various committees, updates on all of the items that are under development and that would potentially be recommended for voting at the annual meeting. There's no voting that takes place at the interim meeting by the entire body. The work committees will take votes and make their recommendations, but at that July meeting each year is where the conference comes together. It operates. There is a House of Delegates and a House of Representatives. The representatives, each state gets one representative, and so I have the pleasure of casting the vote on behalf of the state of Nevada for any items that are under consideration, and then the delegates also are able to vote on certain measures that have to do with the business of the conference and other things. So attendance and participation in this process to be certain that Nevada's interests and concerns are addressed. And so currently, I am serving as a member of the Western Weights and Measures Association's Laws and Regulations Committee. One of our Weights and Measures supervisors also sits as a committee member for the Specifications and Tolerances Committee. And then our senior petroleum chemist, Dr. Strajewski, serves as the chair of the subcommittee on fuels and lubricants. And so we have, I think, for a state of our size, great representation. We're fortunate to continue to receive approval through the budget process for the travel that's necessary to participate in those meetings. But this is one area where we, again, work closely with industry. As we work through this process, if we see issues that are coming forward that may have an industry impact and we haven't seen industry at the table at the conferences, be it the regional conference or at the interim or annual meetings, we'll engage the industry in that. Once a proposal has gone through the process, been voted on by the membership, and there would be an amendment to the handbook, the way that our regulations currently read is that those amendments to the handbook would be adopted by default unless the director were to take action within 60 days of the publication date of that to adopt something different in our regulations. So we do have a process by which, even if the national conference goes a route that isn't beneficial for Nevada, we don't have to adopt every single one of these things. We do have a process where we do that. The director and I sat down recently to go through the items that were approved at the most recent July meeting. And there wasn't anything of great concern there, and so my recommendation to her was that we do indeed go ahead and allow the 2020 version of the handbooks to be adopted. At your next meeting, I'll give a similar overview of the process for fuel regulations, and we handle that a little bit differently. We do adopt certain portions of the national conference's regulations on fuels and lubricants, but we also work with ASTM and some other regulatory authorities there. So we'll give a highlight on that next time and some specific issues. But just kind of a little peek behind the curtain of our regulatory process, so that you can be assured that, in fact, we are not willy-nilly in the way that we carry out our day-to-day inspections, and that we do have a prominent seat at the table in setting these national regulations, and that we remain engaged throughout that process.
All right, questions?
I do want to thank you for the changes in the notification and all that, or when you're going to come out and test the scales and all that. I know people out there really, and I myself appreciate that. It's a lot easier this year.
Thank you for that feedback. We've and I think what Board Member DeFrina is talking about is some process changes that we implemented for livestock scale inspection season this year. Our practice in the past had been to provide notification to individual scale owners about 2 weeks before we were anticipating visiting a particular scale site, which was great, except that you were left sort of wondering right up until that 2-week period when we were coming. And so we made some changes this cycle where we sent out at the beginning of the season our tentative schedule for the entire season, so that you could at least have an idea where we had planned to see you. So were we going to see you in the early weeks of June when we first started out, or boy, should I not be looking for you until the end of August? And we hoped that that was useful to the scale owners in planning for that season. We gave the caveat that, of course, the schedule was subject to change based on equipment challenges, which I think Mr. Sabrina witnessed some of those firsthand. And thank you for the assistance that you provided to our staff when we had to abandon some equipment at your property while we did some repairs. But we're looking at other ways to improve that communication. It's certainly a work in process, but it's good to hear that it was a little better.
Better, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Dr. Spratling.
Over the last 2 years, the livestock industry actually, when it became obvious that their fees had to go up, we're in the red, and we need to get it back in the black. So at that point, a lot of the industry asked, well, should we privatize this? And I'd like to thank Administrator Matijevich for being very patient over a 2-year period of time. We explored that as an industry, and she came and gave us a lot of information and was well received. And at this point, I know at least the Cattlemen's Association has voted to say, let's stay with the state system and status quo. And we know the fees are going up. Everybody's going to bite their lip and pay the fee. So that's...
I have one
Mr.
question.
No.
Relating to the potential fuel shortage that we went into, has there been anything that measures to take that could prevent that from happening? Is there any possible way that anything could be done to do that, or?
So what's interesting is it was an immediate situation in this region. But once we started interacting with different individuals throughout the state, we found that down in the south, they've actually gone through this situation a couple times in even the last year, if I remember correctly. So really, I would sum it up in that what we did by getting all the parties to the table helped to pave the way for success. We still, and I preach this over and over again in different governmental groups, that our state as a whole is very fragile in that side of things, because we don't have our own refineries that are producing the product that you can pull right up to the refinery and load up. It's all coming through pipelines, whether you're in the south or you're in the north, except for in the northeast that it gets trucked in over in that area. That in itself leaves it vulnerable to disruptions. This one was more than anything just getting all the parties together to work out the situation. It's one thing when there's no product available. You know, if the refineries are down or whatever it is, that's one problem. We actually had the product here. It was just not able to be brought up and unloaded to get it moving forward. So, yeah, like I said, I mean, in my opinion, from our industry, this was the best case scenario of all the groups working together, going, yes, it's a problem. Here are the things we need to address. Here are the things you need to address, and we got it handled. And I think, I mean, summing it up, I think it went extremely well.
So for the future, we have some kind of a set thing to everybody get back together again quickly for in place, so that maybe we can get a handle on it quicker.
Well, and then looking at long-term, how do you prevent what led up to where we were? So, yeah, I think the communications are open now between the different groups, and I think we took a good step towards alleviating it for the most part when it was this kind of a situation. There are some, like I said, that there's just absolutely nothing coming through the pipe. You know, good luck, Nevada.
Yeah.
But other than that, I think we all did a good job. And anything you guys want to add to that?
Oh, good.
Yeah, if I may, from a regulatory standpoint, as Director Otts mentioned, we, like all of the consumer equitability, like all of the divisions, is conducting a thorough review of our statutes and regulations to determine if there are any amendments to our existing statutory or regulatory authority that may be necessary to help us address challenges moving forward. I don't know that in the work that I've done thus far, we've necessarily identified anywhere where that's been standing in our way. You know, as your chair mentioned, I think, you know, we have an infrastructure challenge in that we have limited infrastructure that's been in place for quite some time.
I think the 60s, if I
Yeah,
remember correctly.
and certainly the growth that we've seen in our urban areas is maxing out that capacity. This was in particular a logistical challenge, really, at the end of the day, and communication opened that up. I do think from, you know, talking about our regulatory process and industry impact there, that if we had to go down the path of potentially looking at a waiver from standards in a situation such as this, while it certainly wouldn't have been something that we wanted to do, if we had to do it, we have the regulatory structure and process for us to consider those things, and that authority resides with the director so that action can be taken quickly.
And it's a much bigger conversation as well. I mean, there's other departments that have other authorities for emergency plans like that. So it's a bigger issue and long-term. It's an industry issue that needs to, you know, I think, as you said, keeping all parties at the table and making sure that they're addressing those.
Yeah, the
Longer
communication's the biggest thing.
Isn't that amazing?
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, moving right along to item number 10, animal industry. We have the board update. Good morning, barely left morning.
Good morning.
Doug, how are you?
It's almost.
Yeah.
I'm good, how are you?
Good, thank you.
For the record, Doug Ferris, Animal Industry Division Administrator. I'll start with our pending matters of significance. As many of you know, Dr. Goetechea resigned his position effective August 30th. As soon as we were notified of that, we did start reaching out to industry partners, looking for somebody to even fill in as an interim state veterinarian. At this time, we think we were lucky enough to find somebody who is willing to do it for approximately 90 days or whatever it takes us to get the notice out and hire a new state veterinarian. Included in that was, I know in the board report I had in here that the state veterinarian's position was to be relocated to Sparks. And then there's some closing. I'd say Dr. Goicoechea was a huge asset to our entire industry and the state of Nevada, and he will be missed. Moving on to our agricultural enforcement officers, the agricultural enforcement officer 3 position, which was located here in Sparks, is currently vacant. We started the recruitment early on in this process. It has been posted, but these do take a lot of time because of the complete background checks and everything that go with them. So we're hopeful to start receiving candidates soon. This now leaves us with, out of the 5 positions we have across the state, we have 2 ag enforcement officers, one located in Winnemucca and then one in the Las Vegas area. For partnership activities, started with USDA Wildlife Services. NDA staff are currently working with Wildlife Services in the drafting and implementation of an MOU between the 2 agencies. Although we've had a financial plan for many years, there was never an MOU which laid out the requirements, expectations, and the reporting between the 2 agencies. So we're currently working on that, and there's been an extension filed between the 2 agencies with the previous financial plan that we had in place last year. Effective August 1st, we entered into a cooperative agreement, a non-exclusive cooperative agreement with Wild Horse Connection. This does not pertain to anything that has to do with fertility control. It's simply for the management of the horses and focuses around public safety. It also includes adoptions, veterinary care, diversionary feeding to pull the horses away from urban developments and roadways. Wild Horse Connection will, like our other non-exclusive cooperative agreement, will be providing updates monthly, and so we haven't received the first one yet, but it should be coming. American Wild Horse Preservation Campaign is who we had signed the first non-exclusive cooperative agreement with for fertility control. They have reported that they darted 138 individual mares from July 9th to August 9th, which brings it to a total of 542 mares that have received an initial vaccine or darting since the cooperative agreement was started on April 9th.
Excuse me, may I ask a question?
Mr. Snyder.
To what extent will you be able to monitor the success of that effort in terms of how many individuals are injected and how many? Most of what we get is information that's provided by American Wild Horse Campaign. So if they document the horses visually and a description of each one, they have a database which they keep all of that information. So that could be at our request. If we ask them, they can tell us that they have darted, say, 500 horses. When they come back in the spring, they can tell us which ones of those horses have foaled. Is going to be our best, because we aren't out in the field, documenting them ourselves, each individual horse. But they do have a database where they track all of that. Is their identification adequate? Identification of the individuals? I think probably the best that we can expect right now, just as far as, like I say, most of them have pictures, at least a couple pictures that go with each horse. They also name the horses, so they're tracking them that way, and they know their areas, and they track these horses throughout the year. So if the horses are moving somewhere, normally they know with the people that they have out in the field, they track them and know where they've moved and can keep track of them that way. Thank you.
I do have a question before we move on from here. So do we have another survey planned or looking to see what has happened to the herd, whether it's a movement or throughout the range, or likewise numbers, how those have changed over the last year and what's it been, year and a half since the last survey was done?
Approximately a year and a half since the last survey. At this time, we don't have anything scheduled, and I think probably one of the biggest reasons for that would be just the cost of the helicopter and things like that to get in and do a survey.
And then, kind of along those lines, what I recollected, and help me out if anyone else remembers, but I thought we had talked about, a while back, going and looking into redoing the study that was a lot of the basis of numbers of the herd and such were off of, updating that and making it more accurate. Have we moved at all towards doing that?
So I think so there was two pieces of information. One is cataloging and counting the number of horses, and then the second one is looking at the physical area of the range and what their area would be, what the acreage is that they roam on versus the development, because
Right.
that was the older report. We did go and get initial costs of what it would be to determine that. Again, it was cost prohibitive. It was something around $200,000 to be able to have that report. Having a recount this winter of how many horses we have is entirely possible. So I'm hoping at the December board meeting to present a longer-term plan.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
That's Dr. Spratman.
Okay, if that sort of inventory was instituted or started, where would the money come from? What account would that money come from?
Good question. That's why we're planning it.
No, my point is that you know, a good number of the animal identification accounts went out that are already contributing somewhat to the enforcement officer in that area, that we not spend, I mean, it's a very account that's under a lot of duress.
Yes.
And I would say let's not spend money inventorying horses. If the private owners out there don't mind having their horses there, you have some agreements for people to try and manage them and keep them off the roads for public safety. And I say, we hang back.
The concern is that the two groups that are currently, that we have cooperative agreements with are overwhelmed and are not able to entirely.
Really?
Yeah. And are not able to tackle the entire problem. And so we're looking at longer-term solutions for the entire Virginia range.
I'll reiterate one comment. Without the
Hold
push
on
on the
just a
private
moment. I
owners.
want to just make sure we're being careful. This is not an action item.
Okay.
So we've got to be careful how we're moving forward here.
Okay, slap me if you need to. Without private property owners' full participation, we will have no success in any program that we institute. Is that fair?
Good. Well said.
Am I okay, Dennis?
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to our program updates. First one is commercial feed. We currently have 74 registered accounts for the 2019 year, with 6 of those coming just since July. That's mainly due to that we renew every January 1, so most of them had renewed prior to that. We have seen an increase, as Ashley was talking about the hemp industry, we've seen an increase in some requests for brokers' licenses for handling the raw hemp products, so we have taken on a few of those in the recent months. Our livestock enforcement division, there's some numbers there that I provided for you. This is only for our 2 officers. You'll see that they have a lot of miles spent on the road and a lot of time on the telephone, more than they do out actually working traffic, just because with only 2 people, they're both handling, you know, the entire state of Nevada, so they're pretty short on time right now to handle everything in their area. Livestock identification, we've completed, the staff completed 1,324 brand inspection certificates for a total of 23,498 animals since July 1. We've issued a renewed 20-23 brand registrations, and also coming up with that in mid-September, the notices will be going out for the 4-year renewal process for the brand. So We put everything together, all the notices are done, those will be sent out about mid-September, so staff will probably see an influx and a lot of people reaching out to get the brands renewed. So far to date, we've received 2,062 livestock assessment filings. Division currently has 102 agricultural licenses issued out the office. Those are for both livestock, public livestock auction yards, and then also agricultural products. The Sparks office has received in excess of 53 phone calls since July 1 concerning Virginia range feral and stray horses, and there'd probably be more of that if I added in prior to Chris's departure. If I'd had his, I'm sure that we could at least double that, if not more. So, predatory animal and rodent control. Park employees have provided technical assistance, predator control recommendations, and removal of predators where needed. Primarily, species addressed were coyotes and ravens, with a small amount of pigeons, badgers, lions, and feral dogs. The employees and staff provided 128 individual or business, sorry, I missed where I was going. Provided support to 128 individuals or businesses and collected 21 samples while they were in the field. The agricultural products losses reported were 1 for cattle, 50 for sheep, 1 for chicken, and 1 for pets since July 1. Moving on to veterinary medical services, Animal Disease Lab has performed 2,816 procedures, totaling over 5,000 tests since the beginning of FY20. Most of the test volumes include equine infectious anemia, supporting partner agencies such as BLM. When they're gathering in horses, then we end up doing a lot of that testing for the horses that come to the areas around us. In addition, there was zoonotic testing, included West Nile virus, St. Louis encephalitis, Western equine encephalitis, and rabies. The Animal Disease Lab reported a total of 12 rabies cases for the state of Nevada, with 9 of the 12 occurring in this fiscal year so far. They also reported 12 positive West Nile virus cases, which are 11 positive mosquito pools and 1 positive for avian. The ADL staff's taken a stronger initiative on the rabies and West Nile virus with providing more community outreach. We've had press releases, social media, newspapers, and done on-camera interviews pertaining to those two. From July 1, the Animal Disease Lab saw a seasonal decline in the trichomoniasis testing. The ADL performed 747 PCR tests, which included 313 from Nevada with no reported positives. Also documented were 26 cases reported by referral labs with no positives. So it's a combined total for this since FY20 of 773 tests. And in addition, the Animal Disease Lab continues to see a large amount of tests coming in from California. California clients have sent us approximately 408 tests, with 14 of those reported positive since July 1. And then moving on to our final was the industry impacts. And I won't read this word for word, but everybody has a copy of it, but it's the impact that we're suffering right now with the loss of yet another agriculture law enforcement officers. I know at one point there were 12 law enforcement ag officers across the state. We now have 5 positions, and with only having 2 people in those positions, these guys are stretched really thin, and it's hard to respond to things. Like I said, the majority of it is over the telephone, notifying other agencies, with, Highway Patrol, the local agencies if need be, because they just can't get to the areas. We have one of our officers out right now on a theft report that he worked till probably 7 o'clock last night and then took off this morning again just because of the distance that he's trying to travel. But the report is so fresh that if he doesn't act now, we may never find anything.
Doug, is there also a loss of brand inspectors numbers themselves in addition to the enforcement officers?
No, those have actually increased over the last year.
Good.
And actually, I have a question on this. So from what I'm hearing across our region, they're finding it difficult for law enforcement officers in general. I mean, is that what you think is going on? Just it's making it as difficult for you guys because of that, or how does that play into it?
Compared to like the state of Nevada itself?
Yeah.
I would say one of the biggest things, and we see it with all the state agencies, whether it's Highway Patrol, the Division of Forestry, their sworn law enforcement, most of them can walk in the door of another agency as far as like Washoe County, Clark County, with probably a raise of 10 to 12,000 a year. And also those counties, and the city governments pay 100% of their PERS retirement, they pay their insurance. So, I mean, a lot of it is based off of, you know, taking care of themselves, trying to support their families. And I will say ours is unique as well in the fact that we need somebody that has agriculture experience and law enforcement experience, so I think that also affects us.
Okay. And we're in line pay-wise with like High Patrol, another state?
No, we're actually below them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
That's
Why
what,
the difference?
pardon me?
Why the difference?
It's the way it was set up with the class specifications, and I don't know when it took place or when that went through, but all state positions have basically a class specs, and within that class spec, like our officers will be a grade 37, where highway patrol officers are a grade 39, so they're two grades ahead right from the beginning, but that's the way it's set in the classification specs currently.
So to make a change like that, that would be on a legislative level, or how does that take place?
And it's also part of the NRS and NAC review the department is going under that we've targeted as, you know, every division is going through that process, and, you know, there's several instances in the animal industry division where we need to make changes, and not only the class specs, but also the eligibility for insurances, and things like that, that's all in statute and needs to be changed in a legislative year. And so that's, you know, we're putting forth to be revised the next legislative session.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, one more. So this pertains to the brand inspector positions. Manpower, who is the temporary employment agency that we're using, actually requested an increase. Currently, we pay 24% on top of whatever the brand inspectors make their per hourly wage. They've requested an increase of 34%, which we've agreed to because at this time we have no other direction to go. So staff are working currently on putting together fiscal numbers and basically a report that we can take to the Governor's Finance Office and the Legislative Council Bureau to show the cost savings or the differences between another employment agency or moving back to state employment. So that's currently in process.
Thank you. Board, any questions coming?
I have one question. You said the brand inspector numbers have gone up. Is that a statewide as a whole, or seems like in our area it is down rather than being up?
It varies by area. I believe your area is still where it has been for the past 12 months, but we've taken on probably a couple more. I know 3 more in this region, 3 more in the Winnemucca area, and I believe 1 or 2 in the Elko area. So that's statewide when I reference that.
I'm just going by approximately a week or 10 days ago, which we're not even in the busy season yet. I asked for brand inspector a week in advance and was nip and tuck to have a brand inspector on the day I needed it.
Yeah, there are certain areas that there's less of them, and that's, I mean, we'd be more than happy if anybody knows a brand inspector or somebody that they think would be a good brand inspector to send them our way. Because, I mean, as everyone knows, that's a pretty specialized, you know, position that we don't want to just hire anybody for.
Well, I was just thinking that if that problem lays in August, what's it gonna be in October when it really gets busy?
Right.
Mr. DeFrina?
I think, going back to that, I think in our area, you said it's going up, but it's because it's gone down before that.
Right,
You know, I mean, we're back maybe, almost back to normal, but not quite. I think,
Right.
or at least in my area, we're not.
yeah, and it does, it fluctuates, and I will say also, it's hard right now too, because I think it used to be that anybody that wanted to be a brand inspector, we hired them, and so we might have 10 or 12 people that, I mean, not that they weren't qualified, I need to clarify that, but we'd have 10 or 12 people that only worked in October. And when we're using a temporary employment agency such as Manpower, they don't want to keep somebody on the books for 12 months to only work 1 month out of the year, so I know that's a difficulty as well.
So we're going out of Manpower now back to the state? Is the plan, or?
That's what we're working on.
So that's okay. Also, you're gonna move the vet office back here?
The position itself, just the state veterinarian position, is what we're going to put in the announcement for the opening.
So what's that do with the alcohol?
They're just,
I want to be careful about not going off. Are we good, Dennis? Can we talk about this? It's in there, okay. So I'm gonna interrupt you if that's okay. So the position is open. Currently, as the position reads, it doesn't read working out of the Sparks office. If there is a candidate that's in the Sparks region, if there's a candidate that's in the Las Vegas region, and they are the best candidate, we are gonna consider the position for the best candidate. What that does to the Elko office is really doesn't have much of an impact. The state veterinarian is going to be on the road doing the job of the state veterinarian. They are not a lab supervisor, which I think has been some confusion and cross jobs in the past. A lab supervisor is a lab supervisor. They need to sign off on lab results and review lab results, but they're not supervising laboratory operations. We have a supervisor for that. And so we're being very careful about hiring a state veterinarian with the credentials that it requires for a state veterinarian to be hired to do veterinary work and to not do administrative work or to not do lab supervision work. And so what we really want to do is we want to take advantage of the credentials that that person has and hire the best person for that position instead of sort of how it's drifted in the past.
Okay, so you'll make that into two different positions theoretically?
We already have a lab supervisor on staff.
Up there?
No, the supervisor is in here, in this
Sparks,
office,
and go up
but
there?
it travels up there probably at least once a month to make sure everything's running smoothly and, you know, that kind of thing. So, yeah, we have a supervisor that has the responsibility.
So they can run the tests in both places?
Absolutely, yes. So I think there's also some confusion about the certification required, and correct me if I get into the incorrect, but there's some confusion about the certifications required to sign off on those tests. So a veterinarian doesn't have to be certified to sign off on those tests or to run those tests even. That comes from a separate certification process, not a veterinary certificate. So,
Okay.
so a person that is certified to run and sign off those tests can be there doing that, such as a lab supervisor. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So that, okay,
That's where we're at.
okay. And we just wanted to be careful with the state veterinarian job. You know, we want somebody that's going to be the best person for the industry and not limit the locale to one area.
So it's not Sparks,
It's the best person for the industry.
Vegas, wherever.
Mhm. Yeah, right now, I mean, we collect the resumes in Sparks.
and the only thing I would follow up with that as far as whether it were based in Elko or Sparks or Eureka basically is where it was before, is because JJ was mobile. I mean, he did the majority of all of his work was from the cab of the pickup with a cell phone and a computer. So he had an office in Elko, but how much time was spent there was far less than what was spent on the road and traveling the entire state.
All right.
excuse me, one other thing, you do have a state vet now, the person that's gonna take over interim,
We're going to be talking to the potential candidate for the interim state vet this afternoon.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
it's not set, but you have somebody that you're talking.
We were hoping to get that done prior to this meeting, but just schedules wouldn't allow it, so, and then it will be an interim position, yeah.
Before we move on, any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to 10B, update on trichomoniasis law and board discussion. And on this one, I just want to make sure that, make the comment that this is not an action item. We've got to be careful again as far as our conversation on this topic, so.
Okay.
Mr. Harris.
Yes, sir. And this was a request by board member Tim Dufresne. Had asked for an update or discussion on the current laws and regulations pertaining to trichomoniasis. And so what we've done is compiled that. There's one statute, and then also compiled the NAC. And I believe everybody has a copy of that, which basically lays out the rules and regulations that pertain to trich in the state of Nevada.
You're not going to read the whole thing to us, all 10 pages?
I can.
No.
We have all afternoon.
All right. On this one, I think it might be best if you guys have questions or concerns about it, you actually have everything that's laid out before you in NRS and NAC. So out of that, do you guys have questions, concerns that you want to discuss or clarifications?
Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Spratt?
I have a question or two. There has been a lot of concern and a lot of discussion in the industry about going to a mandatory annual trich test of all bulls in the state of Nevada. And I think that is a result of the fact that we have not been able to implement necessary actions to keep trich from propagating through the state. And it seems like it's a lot, and it has been related to me, that there are holes in the current law that will preclude you from going out and requiring, actually forcing someone on a hold order to test. Is that true, and can that be changed?
Well, I would think, when it comes to NAC or NRS, anything can be changed or language can be proposed. But it is true, I know there's places that have been on hold order for years, and they don't have to test.
And it would seem, let's see, how am I gonna stay out of trouble? There are concerns that I think implementation has been a traditional problem, and enforcement has been a traditional problem. And I would hope that we could, I have, arguments with that particular point of view. I think we do, the state quarantine officer has the authority to take care of infectious disease problems. But I know those herds that are either on hold order or next to a hold order in higher risk areas, there's no, I've been told there's no way to force them to do it. And if we progress to an annual mandatory test, how are you going to enforce those to make them do it? So it's the same problem whether we stay and improve the laws we have, or if we move on to a mandatory test. Either way, we're going to have to address implementation and enforcement. Would that be a fair statement, or how would you interpret what's going on now?
I would say as of now, it's because there are no teeth in the current regulations to enforce it. If you have positive trich bulls and don't want to test, we can place you under a hold order, but that's the end of it. That's as far as we go.
And theoretically, the neighboring ranches would be put under hold order also, is that?
That's correct. Contact herds.
Contact herds. So, we are theoretically unable to enforce and make them test their bulls.
Correct.
Correct. Okay. And that will still be the situation if we go to a mandatory test. Enforcement would still be essential, and we'd have to do something different in that case to ensure enforcement.
Right. And I know we've talked previously that I would say that where we talked about that previously, if it was mandatory and you didn't test, you would receive no brand inspection. So if you wanted to ship your cattle in the fall, you would not get a brand inspection provided then.
Could that same provision be put on, added to current law, put teeth in it?
Can be looked at, I'm sure.
Okay, thank you.
I would invite industry to bring that suggestion forward.
Well, what do we have to do to get teeth put into this? I mean, I understand we can't, I don't know what we talk about, what we can't talk about, but what do we have to do to get teeth put into the regulations as they are now?
To put teeth into a regulation is a NAC revision of which the department can undertake.
Okay.
And it's a public process through workshops and hearings, but there does have to be some initial language. And so if the industry has interest in changing a regulation, I invite the industry to contact the department with that, with those teeth.
So the process is the industry comes to you, the Cattlemen's Association comes to the Department of Ag, to the director and says, we want to do something here. We want to put some teeth in this. What do you guys do? And then Department of Ag will put it under.
It can be part of, that can be a process. There's multiple ways that regulations can be developed, but that can be absolutely as an industry group coming forward and making a suggestion.
Mr. Chairman, does it have to be an industry? It could be a representative from this board.
It could absolutely be, sir. Yes. Just,
So it could be done right through here also?
just not today.
Just not today.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a discussion anyway. We're just throwing out ideas. I mean.
Yes, absolutely. It
Probably
could.
the best ideas would come from Mr. Ferris. He's in the trenches every day.
And
He knows what's going on.
And the
He knows
department
what he needs.
often starts the process by providing initial language and going through the regulation adoption process. So oftentimes the department does do that. So you hear workshops, and scheduled open processes, and oftentimes the department does initiate that, but it doesn't have to be that way. Groups, board members can initiate that process as well.
Okay, I guess my question is, how do you officially start that process?
Call me.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
One question?
Yeah, go ahead.
For Mr. President. I don't know if we can, what would be your recommendation? Maybe we can't go there, I don't know. What would your recommendation to this board to help you with putting teeth into this?
Actually, I don't think we can do that. Yeah.
I think this is getting to the point where you want to agendize this for a later meeting.
But I think what I would recommend is the three of you can't call, but if you guys have a representative that you want, and you are pretty certain that industry is behind you in general, have someone contact the director and start down that path. And then, it's pretty easy. Then it's agendized, we approve it to go to workshop and hearing. And that's really when you start vetting all the different thoughts and ideas on how to make it work.
Through workshop.
Through workshop, yeah. Any other questions before we move on?
Just on trick or something?
Mr. Chairman?
I'd like to ask for.
Mr. Chairman? Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, this is Elko.
Sir, this is just for the board members at this time. We're almost done, and you will have an opportunity for public comment at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Just on a totally different topic, I'm hearing some concerns of smaller annual livestock or horse sales and the bonding requirements for those situations. There seems to be they seem somewhat excessive, for one sale a year, selling some horses, and I know it has been a real burden on those promoters.
not to interrupt you, but that's next on the agenda.
Okay.
Sounds like a good thing.
Good, because we were off agenda on that, sir.
Okay, with that, let's move on to 10C, request to go to workshop and hearing to amend NAC 573, amendments related to public sales of livestock based on changes to NRS 573 due to passage of SB 417 in the 80th session of the Nevada Legislature. Okay, it's all you, Doug.
Okay, so this is a proposed language to go to workshop and hearing for the department. We're seeking approval. This stemmed from SB 417 that passed through this legislative session, which revised the language to NRS 573 and then requires a regulation change to NAC 573. This pertains to the public sales of livestock, so we license anyone who has a public livestock auction in the state of Nevada where they gather the animals at one location and it's for, they get a commission off of them for the most part. Under previous statute, anyone who had that livestock auction fell under what, say, the livestock auctions would in Fallon, as far as the bonding requirements, the financial statements, everything like that that were required. So this was brought forward by Senator Goycochea, and what this did was created an annual public sale of livestock. That's a sale that doesn't surpass 2 days in one calendar year, and it stemmed for, or it was put together for these small sales, like the horse sales and such as that changed the regulations on them. Their bonding requirements are set by the packers and stockers, depending upon their annual sales. And then with that, basically removes them from the requirements of having a full-blown, public livestock auction that operates weekly throughout the year. So it reduced a lot of the requirements on those. So this NAC simply adds the language of the annual sale of livestock into NAC so we can proceed forward in licensing those individuals.
Go ahead.
This specifically is like for special bull sales, horse sales, is that what this was?
Correct, yes, sir.
And just to make sure we're all clear, this is actually the process, just like what we were talking about. Is now it's if we approve it today, it's going to go to workshop. So again, everybody that has a voice in it, they get to come talk about it, debate it, and come to the point where you have a hearing and you actually, bring it in for approval. So, thank you. And this is an action item, so before we go to a motion or anything on this, any other questions for Doug at this point? Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make the motion that we go ahead and go to workshop and pursue it.
Thank you, Mr. Frey.
I'll second it.
Okay, and we have a second, thank you. All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, nay. All right, passes unanimously. Thank you very much, Doug, appreciate it. All right, we're down to number 11, public comment. And what we do need to do is, how do we know when it's public comment out of our area? Do we have someone there that could take their information, so?
We can, yes, they should have a sign-in sheet over there already.
Okay. So, sir, it is public comment. We'll open it up to you, but before you leave, would you please make sure you fill out one of the public comment cards so we have your information, please?
Well, this is the list, right?
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Neil McQuarrie. I'm a livestock producer in Ruby Valley, Nevada. And I'm here today on several topics as far as and I'll go through them quickly. As far as the state veterinarian, I understand the director's thought process behind, wherever the qualified person lands. But, the livestock industry is largely in northeastern Nevada, and without, a person here, I just hesitate to think that the industry may be underserved. So I hope that will be, at least part of the consideration. As far as some of the other topics that you all have talked about, particularly the trick regulations. I mean, let it start with me as far as we need some teeth in this regulation. I spoke to the state veterinarian 3 veterinarians ago and said that I would support at a meeting any stronger regulation on specifically 571.658. And we sit here today with the ranching operations that have infected herds, that have been infected for somewhere between 12 and 15 years, and there is no end in sight. I mean, this is literally a percolating, simmering cauldron of disease, and we're not doing anything about it. And the time has come. And so I hope that we can get these suggestions to workshop and get some changes made. And I mean, it's imperative. You know, the plant and industry people would not tolerate a greenhouse operation filled with fire ants for 15 years, and the petroleum industry wouldn't tolerate a petroleum seller that filled his tank with a garden hose after the trucks leave. But, you know, the livestock industry, we are stuck with these operations that are infected, and it's wrong. So I hope that, I would encourage this board to expedite and push forward on this. Thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Any other public comments there in Elko? No? Las Vegas, Dave, anyone down there? Dave?
No. No, can you hear me?
I can. All right.
Yes, no comments.
All right, and then we'll come back here in Sparks. Any comment? All right, then with that, we're going to go ahead and move on to item number 12, adjournment. And we're going to go ahead and adjourn the meeting for Board of Agriculture. Thank you all for attending. Appreciate it. Oh.